Welcome to episode 8 of series 2 of Dalek Bumps Question Time. Harrow asks 3 questions. Question 1. If you could adapt any Dalek comic story for TV, which one would it be? This is an easy one. Children of the Revolution, without a doubt. The chance to see Paul McGann reprise his role as the 8th Doctor on screen again. The chance to see the glorious Dalek Alpha and humanised Dalek colour schemes depicted in live action. Sign me up. The comic story is great, and not only ties up a loose end from a previous Dalek story in a creative and meaningful way that tests the Doctor, but it also provides some hope that, somewhere out there in the universe, there are some Daleks who defy the evil regime of their empire and live in peace instead. Granted, this story ends in tragedy, but if it were adapted for TV, then there is the small possibility that an after-credit sequence, made in a similar style to the surprise endings of the Power of the Daleks and Evil of the Daleks animations, could reveal that some of the humanised Daleks may have survived, and could possibly appear again. Question 2. Should they ever do another pseudo-historical Dalek story, which time period would you like it to be set during? This is a great question. There haven't been many pseudo-historical Dalek stories, especially not in New Who, and the ones we have had in New Who tend to put the Daleks somewhere in relatively recent history, the Great Depression, World War II, etc. I'd like to see an episode depicting Daleks that have crashed on Earth much further back in history, maybe medieval times, or maybe even further back than that. Daleks versus dinosaurs will be an interesting matchup, but overall I'll say Daleks in Crusader times will be an interesting twist on Gatiss' World War II Daleks idea. Crusader Daleks would allow for all sorts of interesting story ideas to be unpicked. And question 3. What non-Dalek New Who stories would you like to see be made into a Target novelisation? There are lots of New Who stories that I can't wait to see get the Target novelisation treatment, but I suppose the ones I'm looking forward to most are School Reunion, Rise of the Cybermen in the Age of Steel, and The Next Doctor. To be honest, any story featuring elements of classic Who, be they companions or monsters, are always fun to see novelised, as the novelised versions of TV episodes tend to delve more into the intricacies of the various characters' backstories, and I want to know more about the life of Sarah Jane before the events of School Reunion, the events that drove John Lumick to create the Cybermen, the exact nature of the first encounter between Mercy Hartigan and the Cyberlord, and things like that. Love and Monsters will be a fun one to see novelised too. Scaro save whichever poor writer ends up with that job. Lots of people have been asking me what would happen if the Daleks went up against the Tripods from War of the Worlds, which is an interesting question I think, because the answer would seem to be clear from the ending of the novel. The Tripods would get sick and die. The Daleks wouldn't really need to do much. I reckon the tripod death rays could probably damage or destroy a standard Dalek with enough firepower, but it's really a moot point when the combatant in question only has so much time before it succumbs to the diseases of the local area and dies on its own. Add to that the fact that the Daleks are masters of biological warfare and there's really no competition. And finally, Wolfgirl Liv asks, I want to get into Big Finish but don't know where to start. I'm interested in Doctors 6, 7 and 8 as well as New Who content. Can you help? Yes, I can. Big Finish have quite a few ranges spanning Classic Who, New Who and Expanded Universe content, so it can be a bit daunting, but there are guides that can help and I'll give a brief overview here. For Doctors 5, 6 and 7, the place to start is Big Finish's main range of monthly adventures. These stories are some of the earliest work Big Finish ever did, and they're very cheap to get now. The series jumps up and down the timeline of these Doctors, slotting stories between different episodes of Classic Who, but for all of the Doctors there are lots of audios that do not require any prior context from those Classic Who episodes, such as The One Doctor and Fires of Vulcan. Some of them even feature one-off companions, or no companion at all, such as Master or Davros. Generally, all of the best main range audios are standalone adventures, featuring various Doctors and companions from across the later era of Classic Who. Some of these are grouped into trilogies, but this isn't as common early on in the range, and even the ones that do feature pre-established Classic Who companions are almost always written in a way that makes them perfectly accessible to those who haven't seen any episodes from that era, especially when it comes to Mel being paired with either 6 or 7. However, Doctors 6 and 7 also have certain audios that are part of overarching new stories for each of them. For 6, these are initially the audios starting with the Marian Conspiracy, featuring new companion Evelyn Smythe, who Big Finish used as an interim companion for 6 that allowed them to mellow out his personality and essentially fix his character compared to what we saw in Classic Who. For 7, these audios take place after the final episode of Classic Who, Survival, and starting from The Harvest, these continue the story of the 7th Doctor and Ace, as well as new companion Hex. Audios featuring Evelyn for 6 and Ace and Hex for 7 do feed into a wider story arc, but again there are many of them that are perfectly accessible as standalone stories, such as Jubilee, The Holy Terror and Doctor Who and the Pirates for 6 and Evelyn, and Live 34, Night Thought and Enemy of the Daleks for 7, Ace and Hex. The 8th Doctor's first set of audio stories can also be found in the main range, but his stories work somewhat differently. Whilst the ranges of Doctors 5, 6 and 7 consist of some audios furthering an ongoing story and others set at random points throughout Classic Who, all of the 8th Doctor's early audios group together to essentially form a cohesive season, starting with Storm Warning. This season consists of largely standalone narratives that link together to form a broader story arc, like most seasons of Doctor Who. In these audios, the 8th Doctor is accompanied by new companion Charlie Pollard, and this arc takes the Doctor beyond the universe of Classic Who, into the Divergent universe, and back again. After the conclusion of the main range, Big Finish began to switch to box sets for each Doctor. They had already done this with the 8th Doctor, who dropped out of the main range once his first era with Charlie was completed, and switched to box sets to mirror the format of New Who, shorter 45-minute episodes instead of the 4-part 25-minute stories based on Classic Who's format that they had made before. The 8th Doctor has a second era with new companion Lucy Miller, spanning 4 series, a third era spanning the Dark Eyes, Doom Coalition, Ravenous and Stranded box sets as well as their sequels, and a 4th era set much later in his timeline during the Time War. While the huge range of audios that Big Finish have made might seem daunting, many of them are actually very accessible, and there are lots of guides available online that document the specific chronology of each Doctor's adventures on audio. So to sum up, listening to the audios of the main range is a good place to start, ideally by choosing a Doctor like 6, 7 or 8, collecting the audios featuring that incarnation and a specific companion together, and listening to those audios in release order. Other good jumping on points include the 8th Doctor adventures, starting with Blood of the Daleks, or the 8th Doctor box sets, Dark Eyes or Doom Coalition being the best options. The New Who chronology is much more straightforward. The 9th and 10th Doctors each have their own adventures range, featuring all of their audios in order. The 10th Doctor also has a few spin-offs like the 10th Doctor in River Song and Dalek Universe, which is a fantastic Dalek-themed box set and a great place to start with the 10th Doctor on audio, as he's brilliant as always. Remember the key audios to start with for each Doctor. For the 5th Doctor, start with Spare Parts. For the 6th Doctor, it's the Marian Conspiracy, that starts Evelyn's arc. For the 7th Doctor, it's the Fearmonger, or the Harvest, which starts Hex's arc. For the 8th Doctor, it's Storm Warning, which starts Charlie's arc, or Blood of the Daleks, which starts Lucy's arc. For the 9th Doctor, it's the Ravagers box set, and for the 10th Doctor, it's Dalek Universe. And that wraps up this episode of Dalek Bumps Question Time. Leave your answers to these great questions in the comments below.
Don't forget to click below to subscribe to
Dalek Bumps.